Hi, I'm Brett Watson, and I'm here with Stacy Homan to talk about what healthy relationships are. So let's start off. Tell us a little bit about what you do for work.
So I am an ESE teacher and liaison at an elementary and middle school. So basically that means that a few days of the week I teach students that are in regular classrooms. I do remedial instruction for them. And then the other parts of the week I do a lot of collaboration with teachers. I do consulting for my regular educators, and I run paperwork and meetings and those kinds of things. So I oversee quite a bit at the school and help establish kind of a climate as a liaison between the therapist and the parents and the teachers and all kinds of things like that.
The reason I asked it is because you have a lot of experience just in work, not to mention as a mom, and in what it means to put together a healthy relationship, maintain a healthy relationship. So if I were to ask you, what do you consider to be the attributes of healthy relationships? How would you list that out?
Ooh. I definitely think communication and trust is really important. I think part with my work particularly, keeping an open relationship with teachers and therapists is a lot of seeming vulnerable to them. I don't want them to come to me and feel uncomfortable asking questions. I want them to know that, like, hey, sometimes I have all the answers and a lot of times I don't, and I'll try to find out for you, or we can figure it out together. So kind of having almost that vulnerability with people, I think, helps draw in to a closer relationship. But communication is really the bottom line. I don't think you can have a relationship with someone without having some form of communication.
Right. So you've got to be open in a good, healthy relationship. There has to be a level of vulnerability in order for it to kind of graduate to what would be called a good, well, maybe a close relationship.
I was going to say a close relationship, I would say. But it also, because I don't think I'm like super close with every teacher that I work with. A lot of them I am. But I have a very strong relationship with every teacher that I work with. I intentionally build that because I don't think that teachers come to me for help and support in the way that they need to. And I can't come and help them if we don't have kind of this give and take between us that allows us to have that good relationship. It doesn't, it's too arrogant for me to step in and be like, oh, I'm not in your classroom all day, but let me tell you how I want you to do everything. That's way too arrogant. It has to be I know that this is a struggle for you, so what can I do to help you? It's kind of more that mindset. Mm-hmm. And that really draws people into being comfortable then be vulnerable and be like, okay, I really don't know what I'm doing with this, and then I can help. So I kind of have to play that out with making sure that people see my vulnerability so that they're willing to be vulnerable back.
Yeah, it helps to establish trust when you can show your willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah, and I was just reading, actually yesterday I read a little over 100 pages of one of Brene Brown's books that I stole from my dad's house the other day. He's on vacation. And I read, and it's all about like vulnerability is like a huge part of this book. So that's really on my mind, fresh from reading that yesterday.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense then. But something that you kind of hit on there is the difference. What a good relationship or a healthy relationship looks like in a lot of ways differs depending on the context, right?
Yes.
So what you're talking about there are work relationships with teachers and therapists and creating an environment of trust there and acceptance and communication, open communication for the sake of students. But is there a difference when you step outside of that and step into, say, closer inner circle relationships?
Yes. Because there's definitely a professional aspect to work. Although I would say that some of the people that I work with professionally have become close friends as well. So you do kind of cross that barrier to an extent.
Of course.
But yeah, I think close friends, it's more, you're spending more social time, hopefully, together. Whereas work friends, you don't get, unless you're more intentional to have that social time, it's much more work related. The conversations are more work related. You don't know the person, like what they're doing when they get home necessarily. Whereas in close-knit relationships, you should know kind of what fills a person's time, what are their interests personally, what are they struggling with, those kinds of thoughts. All my close friends, I feel like I know that information about them.
Yeah. So would you say that one of the things that distinguishes the inner circle relationships, probably even more specifically family, like with your kids, would be trust that's founded not only on your willingness to be vulnerable, like you said, in the work relationships, but also on the level of commitment and consistency
Yeah.
in the relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that, when my kids need something, they know that I'm going to help them. And that doesn't mean I'm going to buy, like Brady last night wanted me to, was throwing $5 bills at me and wanting to buy a skateboard. And I'm like, this isn't
enough money.
This isn't what we're doing at all. None of this is happening. But so I don't mean that. I just mean, like, if you're hurt, I'm going to come. If you're hungry, I'm going to help you. Like, I'm going to buy food. I'm going to have, if you need a form signed for school, I'm the one that, I'm going to make sure that gets done for you. Like, all their basic needs, I always, and just consistently spending time with them, being intentional about talking to them and knowing what's going on in their world every day, and touching them. Because especially, I think all people around me that I'm close to, I have physical contact with, because I think that's super important, but particularly my kids, they need to be hugged every day and shown physical affection. They're still in that phase where that's super important. And really my students too at school, I do the same thing. I'm intentional about touching, like, even if it's just a shoulder squeeze as they walk out the door, something to where I've touched them, because I think that helps draw them closer to me. Yeah. And they feel more connected to me.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I really hadn't even thought about that. I remember one of the adoption counselors that we had when Joseph came home, stressing the importance of physical touch, where at least once a day you are purposefully, intentionally drawing close heart to heart with a hug. And Joseph, to this day, he still is stiff as a board when you hug him.
Yeah.
Definitely some attachment issues there, but how that this taking these intentional steps literally rewires your neurology.
Yeah, it is. It's physical and neurological to have human contact. And there's studies that have been done with. There's that one story about all the babies from one of the wars that were in an orphanage, and basically the babies were just literally dying because there wasn't enough hands to touch every child. Yeah. And you can't survive at that point without having physical contact in your world. So it's, you kind of take that in. And in education, it's weird because, there's bad things that have happened with, so you're always trying to be appropriate. And there came a point where I was kind of like, okay, I'm always appropriate, but I'm going to be way more intentional with doing it. And I do take cues from kids, but I have a fourth grader, should be fifth grader, and she's a funny kid, but every time she leaves my classroom, she's like, whoops, I forgot to give you a big hug. I never leave your classroom without giving you a big hug. And I'm like, that's right, come on. So, even with her, it's like years of instilling, like, don't leave my room without at least a high five or a hug or a shoulder, something to where I've touched you and I've told you, like, you're great, go do the rest of your day, and they need that. And they'll come back. Sometimes I've had kids walk out the door and then they realize they haven't high-fived or hugged me, and they'll come back to finalize. It's like they need that kind of closure with me and that kind of end of our relationship of the day, and then they are ready to move on.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up, because it definitely is an important piece in forging and maintaining healthy relationships.
And I think that it's easier with kids to be touchy-feely. I think it's harder for adults. I think at Suncoast in general, not school, church, we are kind of a huggy community. And I think we get a lot of that input that we don't realize that a lot of people in the world don't give each other hugs on a regular basis and don't interact with handshakes, or, you know what I mean? Like, we are pretty physically affectionate in our community, and that's just the norm. I don't know that that's necessarily the norm outside of
I don't think it is
our community.
Maybe that's, what do you think, Chris?
I don't hug many other people aside from those I'm close with in the circle that I like to make. But I think that a lot of that has to do with trust. I may have missed you guys talking about that, but
we didn't tie trust into the physical contact.
Oh, yeah, but for me, I think that's what it does. Is I enjoy the physical contact, but only with those that I have formed the trust part of the relationship with first.
Yeah. Well, I think
and
that
I think
makes sense,
that's where
doesn't it?
you can take that touch in a relationship unhealthily, with a relationship that doesn't have trust.
Yes,
yeah, that's for sure.
No, yeah,
and that gets into the appropriateness.
I think that also solidifies that, though, in a relationship. I think there is trust in physical touch, and I think that almost builds your trust with somebody to have a physical contact with them? You're looking up like you disagree with me. Go.
I don't think I was disagreeing. I was just making the connection of vulnerability. Maybe that's what helps build the trust.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
And if trust is not given a chance in the formative years to form, then that can lead into, the attachment issues that so many adopted kids have even later in life. And so then it would be really important to kind of
go back and try to
force
build
that issue in a way.
Really.
Yeah.
Well, and it's hard because even at like Joseph's age, who is a teenager, 12. Okay. Their neurology through kind of this point in adolescence, a lot of times they don't like soft touch on their body. They're much more rough and tumble. And that's why you see a lot of middle schoolers, young high schoolers doing a lot of pushing each other and bumping into each other. They're kind of seeking this more like rough feel in their body. And so it can actually almost be uncomfortable for them. What I've read says that it can actually be uncomfortable for them if you're like gently touching. Their physical at that point is much more like bear hugs.
Why is it that they're looking for the harder touch?
It's the way, I wish I had a better explanation. It's something I read a long time ago, so I don't have great facts of why in my head. I just remember that being a thing of like, oh, that makes sense. I've seen that, and I know when I get to that phase, that's something to watch out for. But it was something with your brain is rewiring at that point, and so you're just sensitive to certain things, and so the tough and tumble play is more, it feels better to them than it's something gentle.
So this is something that typically kids that age are actually sensory seeking about?
Yes. Yep.
That's interesting.
And they're not, and it's, so what I had read was that 14-year-olds-ish, like if you come up and touch them gently, they may even like pull away from you because it's uncomfortable for them. Whereas if you come up and bear hug them, they'll respond better to you. And so, because they're really seeking that, like that pressure and that roughness is kind of what their brain is looking for at that point.
Wow. Crazy. So, in the closer circles, like family, how important is honesty? Like you mentioned before that you have very open communication with your kids.
Yes.
So how important is that to to a healthy relationship in general, but I guess even specifically with trust?
I mean, it's definitely, so in my family growing up, my mom like literally can't lie. Like physically, I don't think she can lie. So we didn't believe in anything that wasn't fact growing up. Like she could not pretend with things because she felt like she was lying to us. So, I mean, we grew up with the understanding of like, you don't even answer the phone. And if it's a solicitor, say like, they're not here right now because you're there and you're lying. Like that's not acceptable in my family. Like, so there were times that I remember running and jumping into the shower so that my sister on the phone would be like, she's in the shower, so that I wouldn't have to talk to someone. But I was literally in the shower because she wouldn't say it if I wasn't in the shower. We would have gotten in trouble for that. Yeah. So just, with that climate and culture of growing up where it's like, we don't lie. We like Ryan, Laura, and I, like, we really don't, we don't lie well. Like
we'll deceptively tell the truth, but not out and out lie.
I mean, sometimes we'll kind of skirt around things we don't want to talk about, but even the issue with, my kids and Santa and that kind of thing, I'm terrible at it. I don't know. When they ask questions, I'm always like, like that's literally my response. Or usually go ask your dad because I don't know how to answer. I'm terrible at it. So I think with that, growing up with that, it is very important, but it's also very expected for me. Like I expect people to be honest with me. I expect my children to be honest with me. It's not like, well, every now and then we need, no. Honesty is the way you form a relationship, and if your relationship is hurt if you're dishonest. And in my house, even yesterday, Peyton and I had an issue. My daughter and I had an issue. She's 10 with homework and not telling the truth. And, she had her phone taken away, and she had some consequences. And, I sat and talked with her, again, really intensely about, like, this is not that big of a deal that you didn't do your homework. I mean, I can get over that. I don't love it, but we can get over it. I'm really upset that you told me something that wasn't true because now I have to double check everything you tell me because I can't trust you and you've broken our relationship and that's different. I'm like, and we're going to be okay. I still love you. We're good. Like we're going to build it back, but you're going to have to put some effort in to build it back because you've broken it. So, that mindset, of truth equals a trusting relationship. And I want that instilled in my children. Maybe not quite to the extreme that I carry it, but pretty close. I mean, my sister will tell you, she's like, we just can't. We just like physically, like my mom, like if you were like to force her to lie, I'm not sure she could do it. Like she just can't physically.
I'm going to try now.
It's bizarre.
No, that makes sense. I kind of have a personal question because of Joseph.
Yeah.
You know, he was adopted he was about 4.5 when he came home. And so he spent those really formative years in Africa. He has people are really shocked when I tell them that he has no conscious memory of anything in Africa.
Yeah.
And not very much of like the first almost year here.
Really?
Yeah. And I've been told that that has to do with, at least in part, with the lack of language. Mm-hmm. So he could not articulate his story at all. And so I don't know. But anyway, he was in an environment, an orphanage, understaffed. They were beautiful people that really worked hard to love these kids, but just the numbers were just overwhelming. Yeah. And so he, you know, from early on, like I think they guessed around 8 months old when he came to the orphanage. So he definitely lacked the trust building relational activities that occur early on with nurturing and so on. So even the brain development, right?
Yeah.
And so he is, of all of our kids, he's the one that still has a lot of that survival mentality where he is, I mean, you can walk out, let's say he's playing Fortnite, okay? And he's just playing Fortnite, like he does quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you walk out in the living room and he like jumps like he's doing something wrong. And I know that he wasn't doing anything wrong. I was already in the room. It's just when he notices that I'm there. Like, why? What's the matter? Am I acting like you're doing something wrong? And he'll say, no, you know, like, I just don't get it.
Funny. He's such a great kid. I think a lot of that is the trauma makes him go into his like more limbic system, his fight or flight, you know, or freeze mode. And so he almost lives kind of on that verge and I would assume because of trauma that he experienced with not having, you know, solid supports when he was little. So I would assume that it's because he reverts immediately into that limbic system. And so it's probably a little more overactive than it should be for him.
That's exactly what it seems like. Because his switch, the difference in his affect and everything, his body language, everything is so sudden that you don't notice with other kids his age. You know, it's just so much more apparent. And
I've seen that with kids, especially, you know, in a learning environment where I'm trying to, because when a kid is in that mode, in that limbic system, in that the reptilian part of your brain, your brain stem, you know, they can't learn. Your upstairs brain, which is your executive functioning and your reasoning and all that, is basically turned off by your amygdala, and so living in that state, it seems like it probably is that his amygdala is stopping everything and he's jumping into his fight or flight mode, which again, students that have experienced extreme trauma have that tendency. But anything can trigger it. So even like having something go really wrong and you jump into more anxiety. I know, you know, you guys have experienced anxiety and you kind of have that same feel where it almost is like you almost can feel the adrenaline surge through your body when it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And it's your amygdala signaling that you should go into fight or flight, which is usually wrong.
Yeah.
But, you know, from an evolutionary standpoint, that is how we survived for so long, that it's not something that we've just, now that we're in a safe society for most of the time, that we are able to just turn off our brain function like that. We don't. And especially someone who has grown up and had those formative years of their brain development with these traumas that kind of have stopped other things. You know, he's just jumping into it more than a typical kid would with that.
Yeah.
So we talked about I have my own question for relationships. You are much more social than I am.
That's
Well,
like the
I mean-
that's like the understatement of the century.
Yeah.
It probably is an understatement, no matter who he's comparing himself
Yeah,
to.
but I'm like the most extreme extrovert, and he's like the most extreme introvert.
But regardless, friendships, relationships, that inner circle. So I have an idea. It's not formed just by myself, but things I've heard other people say and what I've learned throughout my life. But I would argue that everyone has this outer circle. So you have like acquaintances, then you have those who you call or accept as friends, and then you have this inner circle. How do you balance that? Is there a healthy way? Because not everyone can be that inner circle.
Yeah.
I mean, even though you have a large amount of people that you consider friends, you wouldn't say they're all your inner circle. So how do you deal with that healthfully? I hate that word. I'm not using the wrong healthily.
Hopefully, in a healthy way.
In a
I don't know.
healthy way.
We're gonna go with that.
How do you? I make up words all the time, so that's great.
I do. And even like, I'm very friendly and I'm very social. So I do love talking to people. And even like last year at school, I think I ran close to 150 meetings with parents and families. So, my connections to people extend very far into the community. And I enjoy that. But those are not the people that I text when I'm upset. And those are not the people that who text me when they're upset. You know what I mean? Like my inner circle are the people that I am probably the most vulnerable with, would be the word I would go back to. It's the ones that I allow to see, my struggle in life and celebrate my joys in life. They get both sides of it. And I know it doesn't take that. It does, just because I have a pretty full circle. It's like I'm not accepting applicants for the inner circle. But I do accept and pull people in and draw close to them pretty easily and quickly. Whereas I know for you, Chris, it took us some time to kind of get to where I felt like you let me into your inner circle. A while. And I had to kind of prove my trustworthiness over time with you, that I was, I had your best interests at heart and that I was for you and I wasn't leaving and that kind of thing. It's
Chris.
That's Chris.
You're not actually in my inner circle. No.
I didn't think I was. I'm just kidding. I never assume I am. But yeah, so because with that, trust is a big part for me. Trust is a large attribute of a healthy relationship in my mind.
And you are less likely to trust someone off the bat. Whereas I'm like the person who I trust sometimes way too easily. You know what I mean? Like I just assume you're on the same page as me and we're going to be good. Like I don't, I've had some moments in life that have broken that down for me and made it a little more complicated than it simple is. But I still tend to accept people pretty easily into my world.
Well, in making the list of because Brett and I met, and of course we in planning this, what are attributes that we can think of for healthy relationships? And trust is definitely up there, but underneath that is consistency and commitment, and things that trust helps build, and things that in return actually help build trust.
To build trust.
Yeah.
What can you explain kind of a little bit about what you mean by the word commitment in that aspect?
That one's all Brett.
I'm in this no matter what.
And so do you feel like obviously in your with Arlene, that's, part of your marriage is, I'm in this no matter what. Mm-hmm. And with your kids, obviously you're the parent, so you're in this no matter what.
Yeah.
What about close friends? Do you feel like
that's not necessarily an attribute of a healthy relationship?
No, it isn't. And I'm glad you brought that up. It isn't.
Because I can be committed as hell to something that's toxic.
And so
that's true.
It deserves a little bit of background, I guess, for context. The way that Arlene and I came into our relationship was it was seen as an affair. Mm-hmm. It was not a physical affair, but there was an emotional affair. And so we broke a lot of trust with people in our lives going into this, and saw the potential for it to create trust issues for she and I. Mm-hmm. So we made it kind of a mantra. In fact, we even have it over our bed in our bedroom, forever and always, no matter what. Not because that's a 10 Commandments written in stone kind of thing that can never be broken, but to emphasize, to remind us how important this is for our particular relationship. And obviously it's important for kids and parents. Mm-hmm. But that being said, there are circumstances that can lead to the need to break a relationship. I know this personally because I went through a divorce, and so I'm not negating that fact or judging anyone that's gone through that. I would be a total hypocrite if I did.
Yeah, but nonetheless, commitment is part of a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
if you broke off relationships at the smallest of things and you didn't work through it or
Yes.
fight through it or whatever, and it's not just for romantic or spousal relationships.
Yeah.
It's
That's true.
for close friends even.
Yeah.
You're
'Cause
going
even,
to
like,
fight with anyone.
I was gonna say, even like the year you did your birthday party that was for guys only, and I was super annoyed because all these guys that weren't as close of friends with you were going out with you for your birthday, and I was stuck not going. Still a little bitter about it, if you can't tell. And I told you multiple times, like, I'm really upset about this. Like, I am closer to you than these guys who get to go because, well, I think I said because they have a penis and I don't, and they get to go on your fun thing, and I get to be stuck without it, you know. And but you know, just the fact at the end of the day, like, I said how I felt, you accepted it, you did your thing, and at the end of the day, we're still like we
Yeah.
have a commitment as friends. It's like we're gonna work through it.
Yeah,
It's
I didn't.
gonna
I
be
didn't.
fine.
I didn't view us any less friends
No,
because
me
you didn't
neither.
go.
But I
Or
think
didn't allow you to
I
go.
think that illustrates for me in my mind. I was kind of trying to think about how commitment with friends really works through that. And I think it's those little blips in our relationship where it's like, I don't like this, and you're like, too bad, and then we're still friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then the consistency part of it is it really is tied closely, I think, with honesty. Because if you're saying one thing but then acting like another, as an example, then there's a lack of consistency there that can erode trust. So that's kind of what I meant by that.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. What else is on that list?
I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going off my mind. But those were attributes within a healthy relationship. So how do we form them? So let's use me.
Not form the attributes, but you mean form
Form relationships
Healthy
using
relationships.
those
Yeah.
attributes.
Considering those.
So let's make me a blank slate. Say I have no inner friends, inner circle friends. How do I form them? Who do I seek? Do I find certain type of people? What do I do? How would I go out? How do I form these? Or let's use an addict who's come from being surrounded purely by other addicts or living in places where they're just not healthy.
Right.
And they go out into the world. One of the scariest things is not knowing anyone. I know for most people, not having someone is horrifying. So how would you go about helping them build a healthy relationship?
I think that's one of the reasons why a program like AA is so powerful is because you have a mentor, and a mentor who is helping you and being a relationship with you in a crisis of trying to kind of rebuild that. Because I think it would be very challenging to be sober on your own and not be able to, you know, all the coping things that you've used before are now off the table for you. And, you know, that would be extremely difficult. I've never had to start from scratch, so I'm not even really sure how to
Well, I mean, that was just
answer that.
So how do you form them then? How do you start a
I
healthy
feel like it's
relationship?
one of those things where I meet someone and I just like them. So then I kind of pursue them to be my friend.
You wouldn't, but you don't do that for everyone.
No, I don't.
So there's still a someone. There is still a process.
Yes. And I think it's almost partly what area in my life I have room. And that sounds a little rude, but like,
No.
you know what I mean? Like
No,
if
but
I
it's
don't,
totally practical.
yeah, like, I mean, I have, like when I met Allie, who's become one of my best friends in the last year, she was a single mom, and I had just really become a single mom, and we met and we're on a training together. And it was like the perfect storm of like, I needed a single mom friend. I didn't have one. And so while I had a lot of friends, I had a lot of room in that area for someone. And and I loved being around her. We get along super well. And I literally pursued her to be my friend.
Yeah. And I guess it's simpler than I make it out to be. Because I think a lot of it just happens by chance. by the moment.
But that's partly the difference between an extrovert and an introvert, because you're thinking through social scenarios in a whole different way, whereas I just go in and wing it because that's not something that really crosses my mind like that.
It doesn't even spend any energy. It actually gives you energy to pursue people that way. But for us as introverts, it expends energy. And I mean, and you have some of that trauma that we talked about that you dealt with and that you have really been intentional about dealing with as an adult. And so it seems to me that the willingness, like I've watched with you, the willingness to be skeptical of even your own inner motivations, and to rationalize as much as you can, to be as objective as you can about yourself, seems like the start for someone who did begin with a lot of trauma and therefore trust issues. Because at least then you have a basis of trust with yourself.
Right. And understanding when you have these weird push and pull feels with people, which, you know, we all do, but particularly for someone who has trauma in their history, you know, I mean, you're going to have that kind of push and pull feel where you kind of want to be close to someone, but then you're scared because you don't trust them yet. So you have that kind of like push away from them to see, like, are you okay? Are you safe? I don't really do that. And it has hurt me a few times over the years, but I don't have that same reservation that I think introverted people, and particularly an introvert that has had some trauma with trust in the past.
So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how I can answer this question that in my mind is worth answering. I might not be forming it correctly. Because how to build these relationships, right? You wouldn't recommend me going to the casino or a strip club to try to make these inner circle friends, right?
Probably not.
Probably not. So at least I can get a probably not. So if there is a probably not best way to do this, there has to be at least some method to help build these relationships.
So I think
even if it's just unconscious in most people.
Yes, that makes sense. I think, going to, I mean, if you start with one friend, I think you can build almost from that too. You know what I mean? Like, because if you have one person you get along with that has some common interests, then they usually know some other people that are similar. You know what I mean? So I do feel like friendships tend to build out from each other. That's been something I've experienced. But finding a niche that you like. So like you going to a book club would be something that might be a good fit for you to find, or to coffee shops and speaking to people there and that kind of thing, you know, to go follow your interest and then find other people who may be in a similar scenario as you. But even then, I don't know, those relationships would start very superficial. How do you get past it?
So I have an idea.
Okay.
Because I came up with questions. I had my own answer.
Good. Ryan does that to me all the time. Like, okay, what's the answer?
Well, I don't think it may not be the right answer, but it's an answer I came up with.
I like it. Go.
So we just laid out attributes for a healthy relationship. So my solve to the problem would be finding areas where those attributes are promoted, exceed, are not worshipped, but held in high esteem. Valued. And so like that's why I've been lucky with growing up, extra lucky, growing up in a church that wasn't a church. I found Chase and Ryan really young, and I haven't had to have many close friends since then. Now I have, and it wasn't a necessity. It wasn't something that I struggled with after that point. So I didn't have that blank slate of having no one type of thing.
Yeah.
But with the idea of blank slate, that's what I would look for. I'd look for places where those attributes that I value in a healthy relationship, and then build off of personal interest and go from there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So Here's the thing, though: if you have not grown up in religion, is going to going to a religious organization would be very counterintuitive to find like-minded people, right?
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend the church. That's why I said extra lucky at a church that wasn't a church.
That's what made it extra lucky. Yeah.
But
Otherwise they'd be guilty.
finding a place that valued
Where else would you look
trust
for that?
or I don't know.
Work. I think work is a way
Yeah.
to do that too, because sometimes you're with like-minded people. I mean, working in a school and being a teacher and working with students and children, like, you definitely are. I'm surrounded by a lot of like-minded people because, let's be honest, we're paid crap, so no one's doing it for the money. Like, we're all
Right.
doing it because this is what our heart's desire is, to help children. Like, we wouldn't be in it for any other reason.
Yeah.
So you do, even in that aspect, it's like my world of work is very much like-minded, like valued people that are on the same wavelength.
That
as me.
generally are probably more trustworthy than even the average person,
Right.
Because their commitment shows that,
Right.
Even in
their
their
heart
careers.
is for students.
Yes.
So I mean, and that correlates very strongly with me, and I think moms too get that. It's almost like even a mom group of some sort. If you're a mother, especially of young kids, like, you're finding your like-minded people with other young mothers, because you need that kind of understanding of what the chaos of your world is. So I think there are some avenues that I have picked up friends in like-minded areas through things like that before.
So maybe the hierarchy or a way to narrow it down would be what you're interested in, but keeping in mind the values as well.
Yeah.
Because in the end, my answer wasn't this is where you go to look. I gave places where you shouldn't look. So
Yeah.
it was basically using the filter of, I'm looking for these attributes. Do they have them? Maybe not, but do they have the opposite? Are they full of untrustworthy people? Are they full of whatever? So, I don't know.
And that's just another approach that
Yeah.
still makes sense.
Yeah.
But I have one more thing that I'd like to talk about, and this just came to mind, actually. I didn't plan on this, but he and I love to play role-playing games. So every other weekend we play Pathfinder.
I'm familiar with the Pathfinder stuff.
And I'm sure that you're going to agree with this. How's that for manipulation?
I don't agree.
Very often, introverted people find an outlet through role-playing games that allows them to explore things in a safe environment that has no real-world consequences. So whatever those fears contribute to their introversion, because I think that there's some natural personality introversion, and then there is an enhanced introversion caused by maybe broken trust and whatever, right? That the role-playing environment seems to, I know this is true in my case, it gave me a safe environment to explore what Jung would call the shadow side of my personality. The parts of me that I wouldn't want other people to see typically, and act those out with a character, and therefore get better in touch, draw into my conscious awareness the things that would have otherwise remained unconscious. And did you read, was it you that told me that there's actually been some studies on this?
Sorry, I had to switch cameras. They made games for younger kids and autism.
Yes.
Yeah, so
I forgot about the autism piece.
yeah, they made a whole separate role playing like based game for kids with autism, and they live their life being told no, like, you can't do this. Like, can I go run outside? No, and they're always reined in, and then they get thrust into this world where they can do whatever. Like, I want to throw a rock, okay, and they finally get the yes, but then they have to learn, like, the passing of the torch. Like, now it's my turn to be my character, but then they have to. So they learn social mechanics while in this free world that they get to play, and so they've been using that as a tool.
I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that type of thing for, children with autism who are socially finding their way, I mean, it definitely can be helpful to allow them some freedom to make mistakes in a safe place to make mistakes, because you can look at the consequences of things in a game like that and know like, wow, that's something I don't want to do in real life. You know what I mean? Like, and that's important. And sometimes, you know, kids with autism, they don't see socially like the ramifications of what they're doing. You know, they tend to be impulsive, and they don't really have as much empathy or understanding of the social stigmas. And so that definitely, I mean, you want kids, that's one of the things, even in elementary school, you know, we do a lot of logical consequences at Suncoast Academy, and we do a lot of like, let them fail in second grade when they forget their lunch and they have to order a lunch that they don't want to eat, because that is a lot easier than forgetting to show up for your SATs in high school, and a lot easier than forgetting to, you know, put gas in your car when you're an adult. Like, you're teaching them, like you're allowing a safe environment where the failures are very small, but they can learn from them. And I think that's almost the same concept, is you're allowing them a safe place to try and see what this actually plays out as. And then when they realize the way it plays out, they'll probably think a little wiser about it in the future, because because that's the way, you know, kids with autism often need to see that in order to really learn it. That's not intuitive in the same social scenarios.
Yeah.
You have, are we out of time?
No. I'm just looking at you because we just talked about autism, and you turned to me. He has, so I was like, okay.
Well, what I was going to say is, Chris, in these games, he is kind of he's like Grand Central, or the grand narrator.
He's like the gatekeeper of everything, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You are God in this game.
and he has different groups that he works with. Yes. But one group that I have in mind is seems to be, and this is, I don't know them all that well. So one of the groups, at least in the past, seemed to be a group that would have experienced more social isolation. Mm-hmm. Have you seen in the role playing game? I don't even know if you still meet with this group, but
yeah, every week.
So have you seen some marked change occur in some of them that you could at least correlate with the role playing environment?
Yeah, I mean it's especially, so we've been playing now 2.5 years with this group. Just about every week. And they, especially more recently, so the last 6 months, it's great seeing them confront, I create social situations for them that they may have encountered in real life, or they would have to deal with other people who have. And they play a character who's lying and manipulative and does all this stuff, and then they have repercussions for it. And they're like, "Oh shit, I don't want to be that person."
Yeah.
And their character in the game changes, and their character's like, "I don't want to be that person." Mm-hmm. And they see what happens because of it, and they change. So yeah, there has been that type of growth in character, not just in the game character, but in what they see in the world around them.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also that you're providing a space for them to come and enjoy that. And I think that there's massive growth as a person to have that belonging. You're providing a place of belonging for kids who have struggled with that. And that in itself is huge for them and shows character growth.
Well, it's great to see them all become friends.
Yeah.
So like they have movie nights and they get out and they go do stuff together.
You have helped facilitate belonging for kids who have struggled to belong. It's a powerful thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Kudos.
Would you say it's a healthy relationship?
A healthily
made relationship?
Healthful. I would say it's a healthful.
Healthful, yes. Unhealthful.
It's a healthful relationship. Gosh dang it. Yeah. So yeah, this week we talked about healthy relationships, how to maintain them.
Attributes, how to forge them, how to maintain them. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
So thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for coming in and talking with us.
It was fun.